I really love Mordhau. It is so far my game of the year, and while there are a handful of contenders down the line, I doubt they'll give me quite as many hours of fun when stacked against it. And I'm glad I've had those hours. I wrote this before EDF5 came out on Steam, so, you know, maybe there's some competition there, but, well, that's a video for another day. On this channel, I mostly talk about single-player games. I play them more often, I find them easier to break down, latch points to the narrative, and talk about those in tandem. There is typically a much more easily defined endpoint where I can say I've experienced and come to learn enough to make an informed video, and big changes that outdate me are far less common. But, well, there are many reasons I lean more towards single-player titles for these sort of analytical videos, and a rather major one is a flaw in myself, and it plays a big part in this video and in my experience playing Mordhau. First, I suppose an introduction is in order for those who are not familiar with Mordhau. It's a first and third person medieval multiplayer combat game with a hefty focus on melee combat, and the melee system has a good amount of depth. We're not talking brain-busting complexity, but there's plenty to sink teeth into. Attack types, armor versus speed, alternative weapon modes, blunt versus cutting, ways to slow or speed up hits, stamina management, kicks. Plentiful room for mind games are here. If you slipped off of War of the Roses, Warband, Chivalry, hell, Pirates, Vikings, Knights, I wonder how that's doing nowadays. Mordhau is where you likely wound up. It's not a bad place to be, really. And for those who are outside of this niche, just know online mass melee games are a genre I want more of, and Mordhau has been my favourite so far. It has rounded off a few edges, but as the months go by, let's just say for the moment that smoothing is once again becoming a little jagged. Top level play is starting to form around exploits, making it once again tricky to approach for newcomers, which is an issue in this genre, and I think it will plague it for some time to come. For me, online titles are best approached near the beginning of their lifespan where everyone is still learning the ropes. But with the skill ceiling and execution these games ask for, the problem can be greatly exacerbated as the months go by. Most of this footage is from after I took a break. This is only shaking off a few days of rust, and I'm doing so much worse. Mordhau has several modes available. Team Deathmatch, which I haven't played. Deathmatch, which is where you'll mostly find dueling servers, which are good for learning the ropes and honing your game. I've mostly had friendly run-ins here. Horde mode, which is an exercise in AI abuse. Battle Royale, which is a fun distraction. And then it has Frontline, a push and pull point control game mode. Frontline will be the mode of this video as it occupies a vast majority of my playtime and is where Mordhau really shines for me. So, I have something of an unfortunate cycle when it comes to multiplayer games. A game may be good or bad, but this aspect is distinct from it. It's not a barrier they have to break through, but one I do. There are only a select few games where I was able to do it. There is a commonality, but I'll come back to that at the end. When I start a game, particularly if it's a new release and I'm hopping in fresh with everyone else, I tend to do well. Not the best, but I can hold my own. But I never advance. I start good, but what's good on day one very quickly can't compete as others advance and I'm left in the dirt. And I've noticed in recent years as my reflexes are slipping and my aim is getting worse, and oh good god, I'm playing Crusader Kings 2. I'm not even killing people personally anymore, I'm having my son do it for me. Yeah, I'm over the hill. I've been aware of this part of myself and how I play games for years, and I very rarely improve. I try to catch up, fall terribly short, and before long I figure I may as well just move on. I'm also, as the title implies, quite easily frustrated. Being in a call with me when I'm doing poorly in a multiplayer game is often not fun, so I do have to apologize to friends for that. Nothing I say when I'm annoyed like that is meant, it's just me opening the valve a bit. But yeah, I stick mostly to single player for my and others' sakes. I do better when a loss is purely experienced just by me and the computer. I was gonna say when I can also retry, but I was playing on Iron Man mode, so rest in peace that dynasty. Yet still, I'm not annoyed when things go belly up in single player, at least nowhere near the same intensity as the multiple little mistakes I make in multiplayer. And that, among other things, makes me realize I'm best off not playing them, for the sake of my vanity, and for my enjoyment, and for the enjoyment of others. So, now Mordhau enters the picture. It fills a niche I'm very much into, and it does it on a scale that I've wanted for years. Big stonking medieval battlegrounds. I should be diving in full force, but I instead approach the game with a good degree of caution, aware of my own habits, and wanting desperately to overcome them for Mordhau. So, how did this caution manifest? Yeah, this doesn't look like caution. This looks like throwing caution to the wind. Mordhau operates on a point build system. You have 16 points. These points can be spent on armors, 3 tiers of armor in 3 regions, weapons from small backup arms only handy when all else is exhausted, or for when you want to show off, to halberds or Zweihanders that will eat up 10 or more of those 16 precious points. And there are perks, little modifiers that can change minor things like lessening fall damage to the ability to completely refill health on kill, or unlocking the ability to dodge. And you can edit your loadouts mid-game, with no upper limit on how many you can have. There are plenty of ways to play, plenty practical, plenty preposterous. It's totally viable to make a light footman, fast on his feet, lightly armored, but carrying a spear to keep people at bay. Or spend it all on perks and armor, and like Solid Snake, all equipment OSP. Or a caveman. Come on! The costs in cap are for the most part decently balanced, but there are builds within those 16 points that don't have any glaring weaknesses and a great deal of strength. Foregoing perks for decent armor and a halberd is incredibly strong, especially in skilled hands, and for the most part you'll be contending with spears, executioner swords, mauls, and Zweihanders, since they either lack glaring weaknesses or their strengths more than outweigh them. The system approaches a balance between making jacks of all trades able to handle most any bout, or specialized classes that sacrifice in some ways to excel in others, along with plentiful tools and wacky items for gimmick classes. This balance is never really reached, mind. As I mentioned, some loadouts are just really strong in all situations. The perks, while helpful, are rarely the difference maker. Sufficient skill, or failing that, a big enough weapon will cover that base. And that isn't a negative, but it is the way it is. Saejima was not made for practicality in any sense, mind. Clad in shorts, loaded with perks which, while beneficial for someone with kit, are meager when his lack of armor meant a single hit from most weapons could kill him. Meanwhile, Saejima had to wail on any opponent, landing several successful blows while being able to take 2 hits at best. If a fight was going poorly, his movement speed is only a slight advantage. Mordhau features a catch-up mechanic, where if you chase a fleeing opponent, you'll start fucking slipstreaming them and will catch up eventually. Mordhau wants you to dedicate and not overextend from your allies. You get into fights, but Mordhau doesn't want you to leave them. Saejima can get to the front lines faster, but if he flees, he may just be speeding up the enemy. My first 40 to 50 hours of footage look like this, sadly. Blame OBS. My first 10 hours in Mordhau was spent playing this way near exclusively. This class that had no advantages, that could be swatted aside as easily as a fly. There's only a couple of options worse than fists, and even then, they come with the ability to block blows and make throws. So, why play like this? Well, it was mostly about mentally mitigating loss and heightening victories. My disadvantages are so numerous that I can't be surprised or annoyed when I lose a fight. Meanwhile, pulling out a victory felt great. Even if I start a fight with advantage, surprising an opponent, that advantage would often disappear instantly. There are no backstabs quite deliberately in Mordhau. Just the same as it punishes running away, it doesn't reward this level of underhandedness. Getting a sneaky first blow just meant that I had to then get 4 fair hits instead of 5. I grew to be pretty good with fists. The rare opponent who would put their weapon away and meet me fist to fist would often lose. I was the biggest fish of the smallest, shittiest mire of a pond, and very few people agree to swim in it. Cowards. I had to learn to properly dodge, to pick my fights, to pay attention not just to enemies but allies. Regardless of the fact I couldn't win a meaningful fight, I could still be useful to a team that was already winning anyhow. As the hours went by, I was now not just wanting to like Mordhau, I was secure in the knowledge that I did. And so I started taking risks. Risks as in playing the game properly. Saejima, for all of his disadvantages, is a crutch character. He's only a crutch character for someone with my absurd way of looking at things. But still, he was very much something I shouldn't keep leaning on. See, on some level, what I was doing was clever, but it was also cowardly. It wasn't overcoming the problem, it was sidestepping it. And I couldn't just keep playing Mordhau exclusively in this manner. I'd have to treat it like Fistful of Frags and play properly. Here's the fun part though. My time as Saejima was far from wasted. With fists, I had to play fast and aggressive, getting in and out of range, using dodging and movement to avoid damage. I had to abuse every opening for a shot at winning a fight. I did have to put 5 points down on the dodge trait to feel at home alongside the costs of weapon and armor for my new classes, and I had to relearn to block. But I had all the experience of being a lot weaker to fall back on. It was like blood doping, but for video games, and probably not at all like blood doping. At a point, it leveled out. I'm rarely a chart topper, far from the best, but I think that I was still content. I had taken so many losses that I had worked it through my system, like being sedated through the worst of a pain to put it way too dramatically. Now I was playing with actual stakes and investment. I was annoyed when I lost, but could take it in much better stride. That's because I was already exposed and past it. And honestly, I shouldn't care about any of this to begin with. It's Mordhau, it's fun. Win or lose, I get some coin to spend on stuff for character customization. Play your game, get your kicks, and, get on. I wish I'd react that way in the moment to more things. Maybe now's the time to actually talk about combat, right? User Trix has made a couple of absolutely fantastic combat guides to Mordhau that go over beginner and advanced moves. If you want tips on execution, he is your man. I'll be going over some of what he discusses, but this is more about how it all winds up. I'm mentioning this in case some viewers feel I'm retreading his guide. Before I start on this properly, yes, I know I'm playing in third person a lot. Before I get people calling me out for playing like that, I'ma just tell you, it's not the worst way to play. It's just the second best. Alright? Alright. So, melee combat. I'm going to oversimplify so we have a starting point. All combat is about getting around an opponent's block. A standard parry, if not done with shields or fists, only lasts for a split second, and if it doesn't deflect an attack, there's a small but likely catastrophic window where the only action you can take is moving. In Mordhau, your attack operates on the 240 system, with either binds or moving the mouse and clicking to trigger a variety of attack angles, and a stab. So with different attacks and different weapons, you have different timings. Fast stabs with a rapier are a world away from the glacial yet devastating swings of an evening star. So inputs are fairly simple across the board, even as we get into the more complex stuff. You can feint, hitting a button to cancel an attack, hoping an opponent will misread you and go for a block. You can also morph an attack, changing a slice into a stab to change attack timing on the fly. The focus isn't on perfect execution, but being able to get a good read on an opponent and baiting them into making a poor block. There's also kicking, which can be morphed into but not out of. Kicking has been up and down with patches, but can force an opening against an overly defensive player. It does of course come with a heavy wind down, so I often consider it too much of a risk and don't use it too often, but this often costs me valuable openings. Then we have drags and accels. As you launch an attack, you can turn towards or away from it, changing the time it takes to connect, hopefully beating a parry to the punch or slowing your way around it. These are what killed chivalry for many. Top level play became medieval Beyblades, with people spinning and pirouetting everywhere. Mordhau has reined it in, but dragging and excelling has still chased some off, and those who use it well can be a nightmare to deal with. Luckily, my run-ins with people who can pull it to this extent are fairly rare in Frontlines. This is more the domain of dueling servers. Lastly, we have my favourite technique, though one that has been largely figured out. Chambering. By mirroring an opponent's attack at the last second, you can deflect it while starting your own attack. It's impressive and fun to pull off, but by now a chambered opponent will often have time to get in a parry. But you can also feint or morph from a chamber. All of these options combined with movement and weapon choice lead to a good amount of room for mind games and matchups. There are a ton of weapons in Mordhau which favour different attack types and that can also be worked into your strategy. people are going to anticipate stabs from rapiers and overheads from mauls. Mordhau does a great job of giving you a great big lineup of weapons, giving them all essentially the same moveset, yet making everything feel decidedly distinct. Blunts and bladed come with their own caveats. Small weapons give you greater speed but ask you to get closer and deal less damage. Factors like weapon size come into play in even more concrete terms, as your swipes can collide with the environment, turning oversized weapons into hindrances in tight quarters, limiting you to stabs and vertical swings. I do have some gripes with weapons. I will say that most every weapon intended to be viable is to a skilled user. Landing an attack costs no stamina, while missing, and most of these abilities do. At no stamina, you can expect a block to send your weapon flying. Recovering stamina during a fight is hoping for a very long reprieve, during which time your opponent will also be recovering their stamina. This puts a good bit of weight on ending a fight fast and decisively. You not only need to get a good read on someone, but do it quickly. So combat in Mordhau is fast, it's brutal, and it's satisfying, but there are often breathers, and there's an absolute ton going on under the surface. Some fights can be over in 1 or 2 strokes, or can be an intense back and forth of trying to find and bait an opening, with opponents walking into and out of range to take a breather and figure out their next move. To go back to Saejima and his whole deal, Mordhau is a game that could very well have exacerbated my stupid problem. In most multiplayer games I play, primarily FPS, losing is frustrating, sure. Outshot, outpositioned, outplayed, but it's all sort of impersonal. Mordhau is more than that. Losing a fight with all of this in mind, you got outplayed, outgambited, outsmarted, and it was up close and personal. And considering use of the environment and thrown weapons are a thing, you could have been outpositioned and outshot as well. In fact, positioning is greatly important. Picking where to fight, as noted, can be a difference maker depending on weapon size. It also means that if you win, well, all of that is true in reverse. It is funny that one of the most common insults I see in chat, that wasn't racism anyway, has been calling someone a gambler. Because it's not an insult. It's true, regardless of skill level. Even the best players are making predictions. They may be better executed, they may be better called, they more consistently and quickly land, but it is still that. A prediction. A gamble. Made in the hopes that you'll fail to notice and counter it. You know what? A block is also a fucking gamble. You're betting that they're not baiting it out of you. You can confirm an attack by waiting on visual and audio cues, but by that point, you'll need to react incredibly quickly to capitalize on that surety. Sometimes it's safer to gamble and commit to a block or attack. All of these maneuvers stack and add on to that fact. It makes battles a fun game of figuring out what your opponent is doing and putting pressure on them in turn. I do understand that there are layers to it. Someone might just be throwing out random moves, feinting with no rhyme or reason, maybe not even really understanding what they are doing. But well, there is something to be said for unpredictability. So you have all these interwoven, not too meaty but far from shallow mechanics. A fight can look simple but have a lot of decision making on both sides. Sounds like a very considered, thoughtful, yet fast-paced game, and that must lead to some interesting duels. Well, sure, it probably does. But remember, I'm not here to talk about dueling. This is Barry Deesh. He uses a billhook. Here we are, on the front lines. 32 aside. Everything I said about melee combat, mind games, careful consideration, well, it's still true. But now it's just nestled amongst utter chaos. Mordhau isn't purely melee combat, far from it. It's got a great heap of weapons and options inside and out of smacking range. Horse riding, archery, crossbows, throwables, fire pots, and fixtures add to the mixture. A great many main arms can also be lobbed as a last-ditch attack. This is an underhanded game where you have to do everything to survive. Also, I undersold the environments. We're not fighting on flat open plains, cliffs, thin rickety bridges, tight interiors, up on the battlements and down amongst the hills, and with plenty of opportunities to get ganged up on and for your surroundings to snag your weapon. Does this make pure mechanical skill less meaningful? Possibly. Sometimes skill doesn't matter if you're pelted by arrows from across the map, but it does make for a game I find a ton more enjoyable, as it adds far more possible situations into the game. And it means that another valuable skill is being tested by Mordhau, and it's one I find just as fascinating, if not more so, than Reed's. Situational awareness becomes a much more key skill here, not only for keeping track of enemies and where they're going and what they're doing, but due to friendly fire being on, making sure you don't kill your friends in the scramble. Someone can be ace in a one-on-one, yet really bad at managing groups, even their allies. Conversely, someone with the opposite skill sets may know how to seize opportunities and catch people who are off guard. Positioning is also recontextualized. You now have to pick your place to put the most pressure on an enemy team while not holding your own up, trying not to overextend so you end up isolated while looking for an enemy who has made that mistake. And if you go for them, are you just overextending yourself as well? The group combat just became a weird extension of everything else I've talked about. See, here's the thing. The combat mechanics do one-on-one combat very well, but group combat is good because of that fact. Fighting multiple opponents is tricky, but they can also trip over each other trying to get to you. And hey, weapons can cleave. When in a mass brawl, your wide swings may well keep multiple foes at bay, but also run far greater risk of harming your allies, encouraging once again the use of more precise stabs and verticals. I start thinking in terms of what space am I threatening? How far forward can I push without losing support? And oh god, is that a fucking archer in the distance? And yeah, you will have archers firing shots into the scrum. Catapults being fired, people being sent flying by kicked doors. Some fuckers throwing smoke bombs into the fray before sprinting in and laying down bear traps, mostly killing their own team. The very deliberate, heavy melee combat that rewards good reads and decisiveness mixed with the chaos of a 32v32 setup with bullshit weapons, outlandish tactics, and accidental team kills. It's peanut butter and chocolate. It creates astounding moments of slapstick comedy where you can't believe what happened. I love it, but it will kill people who are allergic. Frontline is a game of capturing and holding locations. There is push and pull. As long as your team holds more points, you lose tickets slower, with the aim being to either drive the enemy all the way back, or just hold a majority of the map and wait them out. Killing doesn't decrease tickets, only time. So unless you're at a severe ticket deficit, you can really just get to the halfway point and play defensively from there. As Saejima, if my team was already winning, I can still contribute just by the fact that my presence can slow enemies down. I know it's pretty easy to say things are more fun when you're winning, but I do honestly prefer the mindset I enter when I'm on the winning side. When you're losing, it's a push. You have to get to a point, force the enemy off, and take it. On a public server, there's no small amount of luck in a bunch of people all deciding to push simultaneously. A good push is still a lot of fun, of course. But when you're winning, it's doing whatever you can to delay the enemy, separate them, keep them off the point, and there's a lot more fun to be had in pulling Looney Tunes bullshit to that end. When I get some friends together, I love getting everyone to break out the toolkit and make giant turret nests. This is both fun and effective, since every enemy will now be gunning for you instead of the point. And if they get up here, it does mean they're just going to get beaten to death by several people with hammers. Or if you can get enough people together, 3 fire pots each, fireproof, friendly for less friendly fire, and plenty of friendly fire, and you can make this battle toasty. Please don't complain, people. You know this map is cold. This is a public service. One of my favorite perks in the game that demonstrates on some level that the devs wanted people goofing off and having, you know, some of this kind of weird fun is Peasant. It costs 8 points. You're spending half of your allotted points to restrict yourself to no armor and a unique set of worse weapons. This is Bill Hook. He uses a Bardiche. Then there's this tower on camp. I have no idea what it is about this tower, but certain people cannot stand to see it occupied by an enemy. So by my being here, well, it means that one person, me, isn't helping the team, but it's also taken away 3 of theirs. I'm a net positive. That's maths right there. It doesn't hurt that it's very hard to dislodge people from here. They're going to need to go and get a firebomb, and you know, that's a hassle. That's time they need. The change from needing to kill to needing to obstruct, that's a lot more amusing. Playing in a way where you're intentionally trying to get enemies to go at a different pace, blocking choke points, or pulling wacky bullshit like trying to steal their catapult. my love of the mode does ignore something that matters to a good few people. Is Frontlines balanced? Map to map, it's fairly off-kilter. The spirit of Saejima and his fighting against disadvantage really seeps back in here. This segment of the video is the most likely to be outdated. In fact, it's for the best that it becomes outdated. I love the map design for the variety of locales and how these locales really mix up battles. They provide fun theaters for combat moment to moment. On a micro scale, I adore the stages. People have said the game needs more maps as there are only a select few. And that's true, and I wish for more maps in time as well. But the maps that are here are densely packed and give you a lot to play with. But on a macro level, it gets a lot murkier. Most stages give one side a great advantage. Perhaps my favourite example, and one that endlessly amuses me, is Grad. Red team starts in the woods, blue team starts in a castle. However, 3 of the 5 points are outside. In the early days and onto now, I have seen red win with much greater regularity, since blue has to sally forth, and it can be hard to dislodge a stubborn red team from centre point, as exiting the castle often proves far more perilous than entering it. Despite being kings of the castle, blue team is likely to lose a slow battle of attrition. It's weird, this map is designed like a one-way capture the point affair, where red would need to besiege the castle and make it all the way in, fighting an uphill battle. But instead, they actually mostly win by just nicking the stables outside and sitting there. I presume that what follows each round is a several months starving out of those filthy blues. Tiger has seen the most rebalancing since Red's advantage was absurd. Their spawns were so much closer and so much less winding than Blue to Central Point, which was a fortified encampment with easy to hold choke points, which made mounting a numbered offense for Blue difficult. Blue also have to contend with several bridges, each of them perilous, to make it to those once again deadly chokes. Red team, if beaten back, have a small cluttered canyon, and the pathways back into the camp from there are decidedly quicker, with ranged weapons having a far smaller killing field to utilize. Red not only has the defensive advantage, but even if Blue can fight them back, they still have to work harder to hold onto that push. Camp works out a bit fairer, however it still has a clear favour to Red, once again mostly due to proximity to centre point, with emplacements and terrain that allow Red to more easily lock down a flank and give Blue great difficulty in advancing if they do get that far. However, amusingly, that pendulum swings hard when it does. Every time I've seen Blue push the Reds back, I have never seen a recovery. At that point, they've proved their bloody mettle. That's 3 of 5 maps that favour Red to varying degrees. This is from Observation 9. Mountain Peak has the most symmetrical I've seen go either way the most. And the most recent map, as of this writing, Crossroads, has a different problem. It's a pure King of the Hill map, with only 1 point to actually take, set in a fortification in the centre of the map. I love fighting in that fortification. It's so precarious and so vertical. It's a jungle gym of stabbing. What's strange is this map has the heaviest emphasis on horse combat, but the horses rarely contribute to the actual objective, with their arena being on the outside of the fort. Occasionally, some cavalry will lop off a few heads as they run to center, or run through the underside of the fort. It's like the objective is there for the tryhards. Meanwhile, everyone else just takes 5 and plays with the horses outside. I am struggling how to express the point I want to make, because balance does rightfully matter to an online multiplayer game. From a selfish perspective, I'm willing to overlook a lot of imbalance in Mordhau because I've gotten to trying to play it for the fun in the moment. I mean, I'm putting on a show of trying to win, I think. I'm probably doing a poor one. It's mostly for the sake of my teammates who probably do want to win and don't want to feel put out. But win or lose, I get some coin to spend on gear so I can play Medieval Knight dress up, as I said. And I want to be less bothered about winning or losing overall. I like winning as most do, but don't want needing to win to tell me that I had fun. Like how I enjoy the maps in micro, but in the macro they are undoubtedly flawed, I'll take that fun design and variation over symmetry and balance in Mordhau easily. I hope future maps can find a happy medium. But as it is now, it remains a mixed bag frustration-wise. It's frustrating to be on the team at a clear disadvantage and losing anyway, knowing that the map has put you in place to be firmly beaten down. It's also easier to therefore disregard the fact you're losing on that basis. A victory or loss feels as strong as the circumstances surrounding it, but in a multiplayer game, your odds should be decided by how skilled everyone involved is, not down to map design handicapping one side each and every match. So while I'm saying it's a small issue for me, it is beyond a shadow of a doubt an issue that should be worked towards fixing. Moving spawns closer and creating new pathways has helped Tiger somewhat, but Red still holds an undeniable advantage. If I lose a match but went on a sick kill streak, kicked a guy off a cliff, beat up some tosspot using short spear and shield, and was involved in capping a point that didn't favor my side, I should be happy. And for the most part I am. But there is that nagging feeling that my loss wasn't fully deserved. Here's the thing, Mordhau is a mad scrum. Unless your team is filled with mates all talking and coordinating, any coordination will be luck or happenstance. Like Saejima disregarding defeat because of disadvantage, in a full server you are 1 in 32. Be respectful, don't shit on your team, but don't take defeat as any one person's big failing, especially your own. I learned a lot playing as Saejima, even if some of that is how to just equip dodge and get deft enough to dodge responsibility, shrugging off a loss because it doesn't mean much. Make the excuse to myself even if I don't wholly believe it and just get on with it. It's better than just giving up on a game because of my own weird bullshit hang-ups. Mordhau is a ton of fun overall, but it's fun that does have caveats. Besides issues with balance, I didn't even talk about the community much. I've had friendly run-ins and seen chats filled with bullshit. Take the good, leave the bad. I've been playing multiplayer games enough in my life that it doesn't faze me anymore and it hasn't done in a while. But yeah, sorry, briefly diverted. I have enjoyed Mordhau a lot so far. And I hope you understand now why I'm glad that I did. Is this a big breakthrough for myself, or just one of a small handful of games that broke through to me? Time will tell, but despite all I've said, it's probably the latter. It's a game that fulfills a certain want and does it in a way I hadn't anticipated. And that's better for me and worse for some. Putting skill amongst chaos, giving you a ton of options, incredibly freeform combat that's easy to pick up but a damn sight harder to master. Combat that does let people develop their own styles. It rewards cleverness and gives you tools to fight decidedly unfairly, leveling the playing field against a more skilled, if traditional, opponent, who will then yell at you in chat about it. I also have realized, thanks to Mordhau, the commonality that helps me properly get into a multiplayer game, and it's chaos, joined by freedom of approach, and rewarding improvisation. Totally accurate battlegrounds, fistful of frags, and now Mordhau have a somewhat slower pace but reward quick thinking greatly. The intricacy of mechanics and amount of options craft stories from chaos. So, this has been Tehsnakerer. I hope you'll join me next time, where I'll more than likely be retreating back into a single player cave where I don't actually have to play with anyone else. If you enjoyed this video and want to support the creation of further videos like this, please spread this around. And if you want to support me more directly, I do have a Patreon. Each tier gets a thank you, like the lovely people scrolling past now, and at higher tiers you get access to scripts, notes when they are needed, and bonus afterthought videos where I answer viewer questions and talk about topics related to the main video, as well as wrapping up any last second thoughts.